Hello, I'm Mark Wiley, Principal Engineer and Architect here at Tibco. And today I'll be discussing with you one of the many ways you can interact with Tibco Live Datamart. Live Datamart is a push-based real-time analytics solution that provides many APIs that allow you to write your own client application. Today I'll be discussing the JavaScript API and how to incorporate real-time analytics data into your web applications. Stream-based Live View is a component of Live Datamart and exposes various services that you can access using the JavaScript API. With it, you can create and run LiveView queries, get information about LiveView tables, and create and manage LiveView alerts. The JavaScript API supports server push updates so that the client is always up to date, and the client and the server aren't burdened with unnecessary load. To handle asynchronous behavior, the API uses a promises pattern. While we encourage the use of this pattern, we don't enforce it, so users are free to choose to provide callbacks to handle the asynchronous behavior. The API is packaged as a single JavaScript file in both full source and minified versions for development and deployment environments. There are just two external dependencies, jQuery and jQuery Atmosphere. So now that we've had a little overview of the API, let's take a look.
All right, so here we have the API's documentation. It describes every object, function, parameter, and return value that you'll encounter when using the API. The documentation was auto-generated by the JSDoc utility and gave us these nice, easy-to-navigate looking documents here. So you probably noticed on the left we have all of the LiveView objects listed out for us. And when you click on one of them, you get a list of its members and its methods. So I'm going to jump into the subscribe function here. And you'll notice that you get a description for the function up here. And then each one of its parameters is detailed below. So the subscribe function takes a query and a settings object. The query is of type LiveView query, and you can just jump in here and see the documentation for it. The settings is an optional argument that is an object which contains all of the optional parameters for the function. This is kind of the common pattern for the API. Most of the other functions will work in a similar way where required parameters are listed first and anything optional is dropped into the settings object. So you'll notice that for callback functions, in the case of onInsert here, it tells you what parameters will be passed to that callback function when it's invoked. In this case, we get an object with two fields, subscription and tuple, and it goes on to tell us what those two fields are and give us links to their types so that you can get easy documentation on them too. So that's a quick overview of the documentation, and now let's jump into writing up an example. Okay, so I have a project loaded up in Stream-based Studio here, and you'll notice I have a special directory called LV User Web Apps. Every subdirectory of LV User Web Apps gets loaded as its own web app. So I've created one here called Simple Chart and added a couple things to get us started. So you are welcome to edit your files here in Stream-based Studio. But you'll notice you don't get any syntax highlighting, and there's no autocomplete or any of those nice features that you may find with some other editors. So I like to use WebStorm. You, of course, are welcome to use whatever IDE or editor that you're most comfortable with. Let's switch over. So here's my simple chart application, and the first thing I need to do is include the libraries that I need for my app. So for the LiveView JavaScript API, I need two external dependencies. Those are jQuery and jQuery Atmosphere. So I'll go ahead and include those. Now, when LiveView launches, there's a special context called LV-web. And under that, you will find the API as well as its dependencies. So I'm going to include /lv-web API lib jQuery, minified versions here, as well as jQuery atmosphere. Great. Now I just need to include the API source itself, and that's lvweb API /liveview. Now there's also the minified version for production. Just add the .min, and you can use that one. But for development, I'm going to stick with the full source version. Okay, for this particular app, I also have another dependency on high charts, so I'll include that. Oops. And, all right. Now for the actual view, I'm just going to have one div container to display a chart. So I'll give it some style. All right. Now I just need the scripts for my application. And you'll notice over here I have area chart JS, which for the purposes of this demo can just be thought of as a kind of a black box that provides an area chart for me. It gives me functions to add a point, remove a point, and update a point on an area chart rendered with high charts. Additionally, I have app.js, and this is where we will set up our query and drive our chart visualization. And why is this? Oh, I misspelled the script up here. Okay. All right. So let's include those two. Make sure I spell the script correctly. So we'll take area chart, and we'll take app. Okay, this is all we need in our index.html file, so we'll switch over to the app. Now I have here a chart. It's an instance of the area chart that I've gone ahead and configured to save us a little time. So now that I have that visualization, I need to connect to LiveView, run a query, and with the data generated by that query, populate my chart. So to do that, I use the LiveView library, the API, LiveView, and I will connect. Now I'm not doing anything other than the defaults for connect, so I don't need to pass it any parameters. And I will use the promise that it returns to handle success and failure of the connect call. And on the error, I'm just going to dump it out to the console. Okay, on success, I'm giving this connection as a parameter which is a live view connection object. And on that connection, I'm going to call subscribe, the function we looked at a minute ago in the documentation, in order to run a query. So say connection.subscribe, and recall it takes two arguments. It takes a query as well as a settings object with a bunch of the optional parameters. You can see my little tooltips telling me that here. So I'll say new liveView.query, and I have copied the query string here, so I'm going to cheat a little bit and bring that in. All right. And now for my settings object, I'm going to specify three of the callback functions on insert, on update, and finally on delete. When the query generates new data, the onInsert callback will be invoked. And what I want to do is take that data and display it in my chart. So my chart has a handy add point function that I can use. So I'll say chart add point. It takes the series number to insert the point into. And in this case, I'm only going to have one series. So series number for all of my calls here is just going to be 0. And I need to create the point that I want to insert. So I will say new area chart dot point. And this constructor takes an ID so I can identify the point. And for this, I'm going to use the tuple ID that came with the insert event. So insert event tuple ID. In addition to the ID, I also need to specify the category and the value, or the X and Y value. So for my query, you'll see I asked for quantity remaining and the transaction time from the items sales table, where the SKU is cell phone, and the time is during the last 3 minutes. Okay, so what I want to plot on my x-axis is the transaction time. So I'll say insert event.tuple.fieldMap is how I access those values. Transaction time. Okay. Next, the value. And for that, I'm going to use the quantity remaining. Let's copy it to make it easier. Insert event tuple field map quantity remaining. Okay. Now that takes care of the onInsert function. I insert it into my chart. Now for the onUpdate function, I want to update a point in my chart. I will say chart update point. Okay, it needs to know the series number again, which will still be 0. The point ID of the point I want to update. So we used the tuple ID when we added the point, and that tuple ID will be available here in the update event. Well, in the tuple of the update event. So update event.tuple.id. And the new value I want to give to that point is the quantity remaining of the updated tuple. So update event.tuple field map quantity remaining. Okay, that takes care of update. Now for delete, I'm going to say chart.remove point. So this takes the series number and the point ID. So this one's pretty simple. 0 and delete event.tuple.id. Okay, that's it. That's all I have to do. So this will create a visualization up here, and then we'll connect to live view. And once we've connected, we will subscribe to a query. When new data is generated for that query, we will insert it into our chart. If data is updated, we will update the corresponding point in our chart. And if data is removed, we'll remove it from our chart. So let's switch over and run this. Okay, back in Streambase Studio, it asks me to refresh the external changes, so I will do that. And you can see the changes I made in WebStorm are now here. And I will refresh the project just to be sure it got everything I need. And I will go ahead and run it. Now this is going to take a minute to boot up, so I will go ahead and pause the recording and come back when it's ready. Okay, my server is now up and running. All I need to do is switch over to Chrome and we'll give it a try. So, localhost port 100.80/simple chart. Alright, and here we go. I have my hard charts that's getting populated with a new point every time it becomes available for the query. So this is the demo in our web browser, and I'll show off real quick a demo, the same site running on an iPad, just to show you that the API works just as well on mobile devices, browsers, as it does laptops and desktops. So I'll switch over to that. Okay, so I've switched over to an iPad here. I'm going to go ahead and open Safari. And you can see that loads up the web app that we just wrote, and we saw a couple updates come in already. So you can see that it's updating in real time as our query returns to us new data. Yep, there's another point.
All right, that concludes our demo of the JavaScript API. Thanks for watching.